Good morning, Chairman, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to address you today. Though I feel absolutely sure that I cannot compete with the emotion-charged presentation of John Mann last night. May I thank the Government of Canada, Minister Jason Kenney, Professor Irvin Cutler and their ICCA colleagues for convening this parliamentary conference, which deals, sadly, with a very pressing contemporary concern. I've been deeply impressed by the quality of the discussion so far, and I must say deeply disturbed by the description of a renewed wave of anti-Semitism felt in so many countries. As the British Foreign Secretary, William Hague, has said, it's vital to maintain the momentum that flowed from the London Declaration after the first interparliamentary conference in London last year. We in the UK owe particular thanks to Lord Janner and to John Mann, the Member of Parliament who chaired the original all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism at Westminster in 2006 and who instigated the cross-party inquiry which led directly to that first conference and the London Declaration. The British government has responded already twice to the report of that inquiry and will be publishing its third review of progress in December. It's 7 years, in fact, since I stepped down as British High Commissioner to Canada. I'm delighted to be back, but I approach the subject of monitoring anti-Semitism today through the prism of my new role as the first UK envoy for post-Holocaust issues. Not perhaps the most elegant of titles, but my appointment in June was a first, and it was indeed one of the earliest decisions of the new British government. And in this capacity, I represent the British government as we and other governments around Europe and across the world follow up on the numerous commitments which we've been making in recent years, particularly perhaps following the Stockholm International Forum on the Holocaust in 2000. Of course, one particular kind of preoccupation is to help resolve questions about Holocaust-era assets, including property and art restitution and the future governance of the Holocaust archives. But I also represent the UK in the discussions of the International Task Force on Holocaust Education, Remembrance and Research, and in promoting the establishment of the new European Shoah Institute to be set up in the Czech Republic. As a former ambassador to Israel and current chair of the Anglo-Israel Association in London, I know how deeply the history of the Holocaust affected and still affects the Jewish community in the United Kingdom, as indeed everywhere else. But this is a conference which is primarily concerned with contemporary manifestations of anti-Semitism. The British government recognises that the Holocaust fundamentally challenged the foundation of civilization and is determined not only to bring justice to Holocaust survivors and their families, but also to ensure that the young generation are brought to understand both the enormity of what took place and the reasons why we must all act to ensure that an atmosphere of hate and prejudice does not arise again. British Jews are largely able to lead whatever life they choose. Nevertheless, anti-Semitism is a very significant concern to the Jewish community, to the Community Security Trust, about which I shall speak shortly, and to those politicians, civil servants, police and many others who work to monitor and counter the situation. Many Jews are feeling isolated and vulnerable to wider political currents affected by terrorism, by arguments over national identity, and by events in the Middle East. I want to recognise in particular the work of the Community Security Trust, which has been protecting its community and keeping records of anti-Semitic incidents in the UK since 1984. It is a charitable body, works closely with the police, and is a model respected by government of how a minority community should organise its communal security and defence. Its annual report on anti-Semitic incidents is our key monitoring tool. In 2009, for example, it recorded 924 incidents. That's 55% higher than the previous high in 2006, and investigated another 489. These incidents are categorized in 6 ways: extreme violence, assault, damage and desecration of property, threats, abusive behavior, and anti-Semitic literature. Although the spikes in 2006 and 2009 can clearly be linked to heightened emotions surrounding events in Lebanon and Gaza, and the current trend is a bit lower, the numbers remain quite unacceptably and disturbingly high. These findings from the Community Security Trust, together with the judgments of particularly parliamentarians as they represent their communities around the country, form the basis upon which a public strategy is evolved. The London Declaration was a clarion call for action, and the British government has been vigorous in responding to the calls, right from the moment when, only a few days after that declaration, as we've heard, the then British Prime Minister personally committed the government to carry out what you parliamentarians had recommended. In Gordon Brown's words, to rid the world of this ancient virus. And our new Prime Minister, David Cameron, has also signed the declaration and committed the government to its recommendations. We condemn all instances of violence and discrimination against individuals and groups because of their race, their faith, or their belief. The key point, it seems to us, is that combating anti-Semitism should command consensus across the mainstream of our societies, and that an independent, formal, and cross-party approach is the best way of ensuring a consistent, persistent, and effective drive over a lengthy number of years. This must reassure public servants and the police, the social and community workers involved, that this is a battle which commands broad political and societal support in our country, is a high and consistent priority, and one which will not be vulnerable to changing political moods. Combating anti-Semitism is, of course, an important part of the government's human rights agenda, upon which we too report annually. Abroad, the overseas missions of the Foreign Office have a responsibility to monitor and raise human rights in their host countries, and we routinely raise our concerns with those governments. Where possible, our embassies take action on individual cases where persecution or discrimination has occurred, and lobby for changes in discriminatory practices and laws. At home, implementation of the provisions of the London Declaration falls within the remit of a number of government departments in London, which we have, but we've established a cross-party, cross-government working group which is made up of officials from across Whitehall and the chief executives of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, the Jewish Leadership Council, and the Community Security Trust. This ensures cross-departmental commitment and coordination and buy-in. Members of the working group are here with me today, and of course similar close attention is paid in Scotland, in Wales and Northern Ireland. We will continue to promote these issues within the EU, within the United Nations and the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, as in other multilateral fora. As someone who was intimately involved in the negotiations which led to the birth of the OSCE, I'm very pleased to say what a particularly active role it plays. I should like to pay a particular tribute to the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which has been doing good work with regards to hate on the internet and published some very helpful guidance. This is a priority subject for us in the UK, and we've been giving it a lot of attention too. Anti-Semitism, whether it comes from the far right, the far left, from Islamist extremists or any other part of society, must be understood for what it is, and it must be firmly and resolutely condemned. We act in very close consultation with the Jewish community in protecting the security of school and with the Security Trust in protecting the security of schools, places of worship and other communal settings. And as I've said, we are paying particular attention to promoting a good, proper understanding of the Holocaust among the young. By law, and contrary to some of the disinformation that circulates on the internet, by law the Holocaust must be taught in our schools as part of the study of history at the ages of 11 to 14. The Holocaust Educational Trust does sterling work in training teachers and in taking teenagers from across Britain to see Auschwitz-Birkenau for themselves on regular chartered day trips. Seeing is believing. We think that eventually this will lead to a wiser and deeper understanding among university students of the dangerous and disgusting propaganda being put out by extremist activists and by hostile countries like Iran. We hope too that this work will continue to help marginalize such Holocaust deniers, Holocaust glorifiers or Holocaust trivializers who still exist. The rise of anti-Semitism on our academic campuses is a particular worry. It's not everywhere, of course, but in some quite important institutions of higher education, there has been a rise in the incidence of inflammatory speakers and agitation among the student population. Trade union advocacy of an academic boycott of Israel is, of course, wholly out of order. It's a notion that has been roundly condemned by university leaders and by government ministers, and despite quite a deal of political publicity, it frankly does not seem to have much traction at the moment in the UK. Only last week, the Anglo-Israel Association, which I chair, held a tremendously well-attended day-long seminar with top-flight British and Israeli journalists and a host of student leaders and academics to discuss media coverage of Israel and the damaging stereotypes generated by compressed and politically charged reporting of contemporary media. I think this is an area which will require increasing attention. The nature of the media, the political pressures they're operating under, the time constraints they're operating under, and the changing technology is setting up a real challenge to what we have conventionally considered to be the right forms of objective, impartial reporting. And that's an area which we shall be paying considerable attention to in London. So the challenge is great, the challenge is insidious. We have to find the right balance between the protection of free speech and constraints on hate speech. We have to find solutions that will carry people with us, not because they are told to do so, but because it is self-evidently the right thing to do in order to defeat this ancient scourge of anti-Semitism. This meeting has already prompted, in my mind at least, a number of interesting suggestions for further work, and I hope that the result of this conference will indeed re-energize all of you who are working and concerned by these subjects, and will re-energize us all in a battle which quite clearly needs to be fought with renewed energy. Thank you very much indeed.